The vastness of space stretched before Captain Elder's ancient eyes. 5,000 years of life had dulled the wonder he once felt gazing into the cosmic abyss. The view screen of the Varan exploration vessel Eternal Dawn displayed an uncharted solar system, its unfamiliar star patterns offering a rare moment of novelty. "Analysis complete, Captain," reported Navigator Lorne, his smooth gray skin reflecting the console lights. "The third planet shows unusual energy patterns, artificial in origin." Elder nodded slowly. Such discoveries had become routine over his lengthy existence. The Varan species had conquered death itself 2 millennia ago through a combination of cellular regeneration technology and consciousness transfer. Physical bodies could be replaced, memories perfectly preserved. True death had become nothing more than an ancient memory. "Prepare a detailed scan," Elder instructed. "Standard first contact protocols, if intelligent life is confirmed." Around him, the bridge crew worked with unhurried precision. Rush and urgency had long since vanished from Varan culture. Why hurry when eternity stretched before you? Science Officer Tam, only 800 years old and considered practically an infant, showed the most interest, leaning forward at her station. "Captain, these energy signatures don't match any known civilization in our records," Tam said, actual excitement coloring her voice. "The radiation patterns suggest rapid technological advancement, perhaps only a few centuries from primitive to space-capable." Elder raised an eyebrow ridge, the closest expression to surprise his face had formed in decades. "Impossible. No species develops that quickly." "The data is conclusive," Tam insisted. "And there's more. Their communication suggests they're actively exploring beyond their solar system, despite having extremely limited lifespans." The bridge fell silent. The concept seemed absurd to the gathered Varans. Their own society had needed thousands of years to develop interstellar travel. Why would any species risk the dangers of space exploration when their lives were so fleeting? Elder rose from his command chair and approached the main view screen. "Show me the planet." The screen shifted to display a blue-green world wrapped in swirling white clouds. Beautiful, yet ordinary compared to many planets the Varans had catalogued over the millennia. "Life expectancy?" Elder asked. Tam consulted her readings. Based on intercepted communications, approximately 80 planetary cycles. Several crew members actually gasped. Elder himself felt an unfamiliar sensation in his chest, something like distant pity mixed with disbelief. 80 years, he murmured. Barely time to learn anything of value. Second Officer Mrill, Elder's longtime companion of 3,000 years, joined him at the view screen. "Perhaps we should bypass this system. What could such brief creatures possibly teach beings like us?" Elder considered this logical suggestion. The Varan Council back home rarely showed interest in fleeting civilizations. Why invest centuries in diplomatic relations with species whose representatives would die and be replaced every few decades? It was inefficient, messy. Yet something about these readings tugged at Elder's curiosity, a feeling he had almost forgotten. "Negative," he decided. "We will proceed with contact. These humans, as they call themselves, have achieved space travel despite their limitations. That alone deserves investigation." As the Eternal Dawn altered course toward the third planet, Elder reviewed the preliminary data. The humans appeared fragile, their bodies easily damaged, their lives extinguished by countless natural threats. Yet they had spread across their world, built impressive structures, created art and music, and now reached for the stars. How do they accomplish anything meaningful? Mrell wondered aloud. How do they pass knowledge between generations fast enough to advance? Elder had no answer. For the first time in centuries, he faced a genuine mystery. These humans lived like mayflies compared to the Varans, yet they moved through existence with apparent purpose and drive. What could motivate such fleeting creatures? "Prepare the contact team," Elder ordered. "I will lead the expedition myself." The Varan ship maneuvered silently through space, approaching the smaller human vessel. Elder stood in the observation deck, watching as the alien craft grew larger on the view screen. Unlike the sleek, perfect curves of Varan design, the human ship was angular, with protruding instruments and visible repair patches, practical rather than aesthetic. "They've detected us," announced Communications Officer Reth. "They're transmitting a greeting message on multiple frequencies." Elder nodded. "Respond with our standard peace introduction. Prepare the shuttle for direct contact." The human ship's response came quickly, almost hastily by Varan standards. Their captain requested a face-to-face meeting, suggesting they dock their vessels to allow direct communication. Such trust from an unknown species surprised Elder. It could be a trap, warned Security Chief Dorn, who had spent 3,000 years perfecting defensive protocols. "Unlikely," Elder replied. "Their weapons systems, while active, are minimal compared to ours. They'd pose no threat." Hours later, the airlock between the two ships sealed with a metallic hiss. Elder led a small delegation to meet the humans, his tall, slender frame towering over the rest of his crew. The inner door slid open to reveal 5 figures waiting on the other side. Elder's first impression was of fragility. The humans were shorter, with varying skin tones ranging from light beige to deep brown. Their captain stepped forward, a sturdy man with lines etched into his face and silver threaded through his dark hair. "Captain James Walker of the Earth Exploration Vessel Pioneer," he announced, extending a hand in what their transmitted protocols identified as a greeting gesture. "Welcome to our ship." Elder touched the man's hand briefly, noting its warmth and the pulse of life beneath the skin. "Captain Elder of the Varan Eternal Dawn. We come in peace and curiosity." Walker's face creased into an expression of genuine pleasure. "First contact. This is history in the making. My crew and I have trained for this moment our entire careers." The statement struck Elder as odd. An entire career for these beings might be mere decades, hardly enough time to master even basic interstellar protocols. "Please, join us in our conference room," Walker continued. "We have much to discuss." The human ship's interior revealed many surprises. Where Varan vessels were designed for centuries of continuous operation, the human craft showed signs of constant adaptation. Panels had been replaced, systems upgraded, and personal touches adorned workstations. Pictures of other humans, small decorative objects, handwritten notes. In the conference room, Walker introduced his crew. Navigation Officer Miller, Science Specialist Reed, Cultural Liaison Park, and Security Officer Daniels. Each human radiated an energy that Elder found both fascinating and exhausting. "How old is your civilization?" asked Reed, her eyes bright with curiosity. "The Varan Cooperative has existed for approximately 30,000 of your Earth years," Elder replied. "I personally have lived for 5,000 years." The humans exchanged glances of astonishment. 5,000. Walker repeated. "That's not possible. Are you speaking literally?" "Entirely literal," Elder confirmed. "The average Varan lifespan is unlimited. We conquered biological death long ago." A heavy silence filled the room until Walker laughed, a sharp, genuine sound that startled the Varan delegation. "Well, that explains your patience during approach procedures," he said. "We thought your ship was moving unusually slowly." "There is no need for haste when time is abundant," Elder explained. Officer Daniels leaned forward. "But what drives your people? What gives your lives purpose?" The question caught Elder off guard. No Varan had asked such a thing in his memory. "We preserve knowledge. We observe. We exist," he answered simply. Walker nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting. For us, it's our limited time that gives everything meaning. We explore because we might not get another chance." Elder studied the human captain's face, noting the lines around his eyes, the subtle signs of aging already at work. These humans lived their entire existence in what would be a brief moment to a Varan, yet they had already reached the stars. "Perhaps," Elder suggested, "we have much to learn from each other." The next day, Captain Walker stepped aboard the Eternal Dawn, his footsteps echoing in the vast, silent corridors. The Varan ship dwarfed the Pioneer, its interior spaces designed with the casual extravagance of beings unconcerned with limitations of time or resources. Elder led Walker through chambers filled with artifacts from 1,000 worlds, some preserved in perfect condition despite being millennia old. "Your ship is like a museum," Walker remarked, pausing to examine a crystal sculpture that seemed to shift colors as he moved around it. "We prefer to think of it as a living archive," Elder replied. "When one lives forever, collecting becomes an inevitable habit." They entered a circular observation dome that offered a spectacular view of space and Walker's smaller vessel floating nearby. Several Varans were present, studying the human ship with various instruments. They barely acknowledged the visitor's arrival. "Your crew seems," Walker searched for the right word, "disconnected." Elder tilted his head in consideration. "An interesting observation. Perhaps we are. When you have worked alongside the same individuals for centuries, communication becomes minimal, efficient." Walker shook his head. "On Pioneer, our crew changes every few years as people rotate assignments or retire. The constant turnover keeps things fresh. New ideas, different perspectives." "How inefficient," noted Tam, who had joined them. "The knowledge loss must be substantial." "Not at all," Walker countered. "Our databases preserve information, and our training programs improve with each generation. But more importantly, new eyes see new possibilities." Elder gestured toward a floating display showing Earth's history, compiled from intercepted broadcasts and data. "Your species has advanced remarkably quickly, from primitive flight to interstellar travel in less than 3 centuries. The Varan took 5,000 years to achieve similar technology." Walker studied the timeline with pride. "Necessity is a powerful motivator. When you might not live to see tomorrow, you work harder to make today count." Tam approached with a medical scanner. Her interest clearly piqued. "Captain Walker, may I examine you? Your biology fascinates me." Walker agreed with a casual shrug that surprised the Varans. Allowing an alien to scan one's body would require extensive committee approvals in Varan culture. "Your cellular structure shows damage," Tam announced after studying the readings. "Multiple healed injuries, radiation exposure, and clear signs of aging." "Battle scars," Walker said with a smile. "Each one tells a story." Elder found this perspective baffling. "You speak of deterioration as if it were valuable." "It is," Walker insisted. "Each scar reminds me I survived something difficult. The gray hairs show I've gained experience. Nothing valuable comes without cost." Later, in the ship's archive chamber, Walker examined historical records of Varan society. The data showed a clear pattern. Technological advancement had slowed dramatically after immortality was achieved. Art, music, and literature became increasingly rare with each passing millennium. "What happens when a Varan faces true danger?" Walker asked. "When death becomes possible despite your technology." Elder's expression changed subtly. "We avoid such situations. Risk assessment is a cornerstone of our decision-making. So you never explore a volatile nebula just to see its beauty. Never land on an unstable planet because it might hold something wonderful." Walker's voice held a note of pity that made Elder uncomfortable. "Such recklessness would be considered mental instability," Elder stated. "Why risk eternal existence for momentary experience?" Walker stood at the viewing portal, watching stars streak by. "Because without risk, there's no discovery. Without ends, beginnings lose their meaning." He turned to face Elder. "Tomorrow I'd like to invite some of your crew to join us on Pioneer. We're planning a survey mission to an asteroid field nearby. Nothing too dangerous," he added with a smile that suggested otherwise. Elder should have refused immediately. The proposal violated dozens of Varan safety protocols. Yet he found himself curious. A sensation so long absent he had almost forgotten its feel. "I will consider it," he said, surprising himself and the other Varans present. Perhaps a small delegation would be. educational. Elder selected 3 crew members to join the human expedition. Tam, eager with scientific curiosity. Mrel, his cautious second officer. And young Lorne, who had shown unusual interest in human culture. Their shuttle docked with Pioneer, where Captain Walker greeted them with unexpected energy. "Perfect timing," Walker said. "We're approaching the asteroid field now. It contains unusual mineral formations our scanners can't identify." The Varens followed Walker to Pioneer's bridge, a compact, bustling space that contrasted sharply with their own silent command center. Humans called out reports, moved between stations, and engaged in brief personal exchanges that seemed irrelevant to their duties. "Is this chaos necessary?" Mrel whispered to Elder. "They call it teamwork," Elder replied, watching the efficient dance with newfound interest. On the main view screen, a dense field of tumbling rocks appeared, some small as fists, others massive as mountains. Occasional energy flashes sparked between the larger bodies. "Those discharges are what we're investigating," explained Officer Reed. "They contain particles our science hasn't cataloged before." Tam moved to a sensor station, examining the readings. "The energy pattern is unstable. These discharges will increase in frequency and intensity over the next few hours." Walker nodded. "Exactly why we need to collect samples now, before the field becomes too active. Miller, take us in. Daniels, prep the collection drone." Lorne looked alarmed. "You're entering the field. Our safety protocols would require weeks of observation before such an approach." Walker smiled. "Sometimes you have to dance with the storm to see the rainbow." The Pioneer moved carefully between the outer asteroids, its hull occasionally pinging with tiny impacts. Elder felt an unfamiliar sensation in his chest, a tightness, a quickening. After millennia of existence, he recognized with shock that he was experiencing fear. There, Reed pointed at the screen. "That cluster is showing the highest concentration of energy signatures." The ship moved closer. Suddenly, a warning alarm blared. "Energy spike." Miller called out, "Massive discharge building up. Launch the drone," Walker ordered calmly. The collection vehicle shot from Pioneer's Bay, racing toward the asteroid cluster. As it neared its target, the space between rocks lit up with blinding energy. The drone transmitted data for 3 seconds before being vaporized. "Got it," Reed exclaimed. "Sample analysis coming through now." Another alarm sounded, more urgent than the first. "Captain, the discharge created a chain reaction," Miller reported. "The field is destabilizing. We have multiple energy waves approaching." Walker's demeanor changed instantly. Evasive maneuvers. Full reverse thrust. The Pioneer lurched as it turned, but the spreading energy wave moved faster than expected. A brilliant flash filled the view screen. "Shields failing," called Daniels. "Impact in 5 seconds." Elder watched the humans respond with astonishing coordination. No panic, no hesitation. Just focused action against impossible odds. Walker made decisions instantly that Varen committees would debate for years. "Divert power from life support to shields," Walker commanded. "We can breathe shallow for a few minutes." The energy wave hit with tremendous force. The ship groaned and shuddered. Panels exploded in sparks, and for a moment gravity failed. Elder found himself floating, watching a drop of his own blue blood drift before his eyes from a cut on his hand. Perhaps the first injury he had sustained in 2,000 years. "Hull breach on Deck 3. Someone shouted. "Seal it off," Walker ordered. "Daniels, get a repair team there now." Through the chaos, Elder noticed something extraordinary. The humans were smiling. Not from madness, but from the thrill of fighting for survival. They were afraid yet energized, working together with passionate purpose. The ship stabilized eventually, limping away from the asteroid field with significant damage. Walker wiped blood from a gash on his forehead, then checked on his Varen guests. "Everyone all right?" he asked Elder. "We survived," Elder said, the concept feeling strangely new. Why are your people not distressed? We nearly died. Walker's eyes held a light Elder had never seen in Varen eyes. Nearly dying reminds us we're alive. Nothing makes you feel more immortal than cheating death. The return to Eternal Dawn was subdued. Elder and his team carried the weight of their experience like physical objects. The ship's medical bay buzzed with unusual activity as the 4 Varens received treatment for minor injuries. Cuts and bruises that would have been routine for humans, but represented profound novelty for the immortal beings. Your cellular regeneration is already addressing the damage, the medical officer noted, scanning Elder's hand where the cut had been. No lasting harm done. But harm had been done, Elder realized, not to their bodies, but to the comfortable certainty that had defined Varen existence for millennia. That evening, Elder found Tam analyzing the data recovered from the human drone before its destruction. Her eyes showed an intensity he had never noticed before. These particles, she said without looking up, they challenge our understanding of matter itself. The humans risked everything for this discovery. And was it worth the risk? Elder asked. Tam paused, considering the question with uncharacteristic care. I believe it was. This knowledge could advance our science beyond what we've achieved in the last 5 centuries. Later, Elder called a meeting of the contact team in his private chambers. Lorne arrived first, pacing with nervous energy. Mrel entered last, his usual composed demeanor noticeably disturbed. I've prepared my formal report condemning the humans' reckless behavior, Mrel announced. Their disregard for safety protocols endangered both ships and crews. The Council will likely recommend minimal future contact. Lorne stopped pacing. That would be a mistake. The bold contradiction, rare in Varen discourse, caused both Elder and Mrel to stare at the young navigator. Explain, Elder requested. The humans achieved in hours what our protocols would have prevented us from attempting for decades, Lorne said. Yes, there was danger, but there was also life. Life. Mrel repeated the word as if it were foreign. I've reviewed our historical archives, Lorne continued. In the millennia before immortality, our species made discoveries weekly that now take centuries. Our music was passionate, our art evolving. We took risks. Elder moved to the viewport, watching the distant stars. Walker said something similar, that mortality gives purpose. That's absurd, Mrel countered. Immortality gives us endless opportunity to learn and grow. Yet we don't, Tam said quietly. When was the last time you learned something truly new, Mrel? Not just accumulated data, but transformed your understanding. Mrel had no immediate answer. The conversation lasted deep into the night cycle, the longest, most vigorous debate Elder had participated in for centuries. No consensus was reached, but something had changed among the 4 Varens. Questions long unasked hung in the air between them. The next morning, Elder was surprised to discover several crew members gathered in the recreation chamber, watching recordings from the asteroid field incident. Their faces showed a range of emotions Elder hadn't observed on the ship before: fascination, anxiety, wonder. Captain, one technician approached hesitantly. Is it true the humans risked their lives for knowledge? It is, Elder confirmed. Why? The technician asked. Elder considered the question carefully. Captain Walker suggested that meaning comes from choices with consequences, that finite resources, including time, create value through scarcity. The gathering grew as word spread. More crew members arrived, asking questions that would have been unthinkable days earlier. How did humans decide what risks were worthwhile? Did they fear death? What gave their brief lives purpose? When Walker contacted Eternal Dawn with an invitation to join a celebration aboard Pioneer, a successful mission party, despite the damage sustained, Elder expected resistance from his crew. Instead, there were volunteers. That evening, 20 Varens gathered in Pioneer's mess hall, watching in astonishment as humans danced to loud music, shared intoxicating beverages, and told animated stories of past adventures. The humans' laughter, full-bodied and unreserved, filled the room. Young Lorne approached Elder, holding a glass of human liquor he had cautiously tasted. "Captain, I've made a decision. I want to request assignment as permanent liaison to the humans." Elder nodded, surprising himself with his response. "As do I." 3 months passed. The Eternal Dawn remained in orbit around a neutral moon, continuing exchanges with the human vessel. What had begun as a standard first contact mission had evolved into something unprecedented in Varan history, a cultural immersion that spread through the immortal crew like a subtle fever. Elder stood in Pioneer's observation deck, watching the moonrise over the gas giant below. Walker joined him, offering a cup of coffee, a bitter human stimulant Elder had grown to appreciate. "Your crew is changing," Walker observed. "I notice it every time they visit." Elder nodded. "The Council is concerned. Our latest communication suggested we are becoming contaminated by human perspectives." Walker laughed. "Is that such a bad thing? For a society built on perfect stability, potentially catastrophic." Elder sipped the hot liquid. "Yet I find myself unconcerned." Earlier that day, Elder had witnessed something remarkable. Tam and 3 other Varan scientists had joined the human research team in testing a new propulsion theory. When the experiment yielded unexpected results, the humans had cheered while the Varans stood confused. Science Officer Reed noticed their reaction. "Don't you see?" she had explained. "We proved our hypothesis wrong. Now we get to discover what's actually happening." The concept of celebrating failure as a step toward knowledge was revolutionary to the Varans, whose careful calculations typically eliminated the possibility of error, along with the chance for surprise. "Tomorrow we're taking a shuttle down to the moon's surface," Walker said, interrupting Elder's thoughts. "Geological expedition. Interested in joining us? The terrain is unstable, but the mineral formations are supposed to be spectacular." A month ago, Elder would have declined instantly. Now he found himself weighing the risk against something new, curiosity. "I would like that," he decided. The expedition proved more dangerous than anticipated. A sudden seismic event opened a crevasse beneath their landing site. The shuttle's emergency systems activated barely in time, thrusters firing at maximum capacity to escape the collapsing ground. As they shot skyward, Walker whooped with exhilaration while Elder gripped his seat, heart pounding in a way it hadn't for thousands of years. When they reached stable orbit, Elder realized he was laughing, a rusty, unpracticed sound. "I haven't felt that alive in millennia," he admitted. Walker's expression turned serious. "That's the trade-off, isn't it? Your people gained endless time, but lost the intensity that comes with risk." That evening, Elder received a priority communication from the Varan Council. Their patience had ended. Eternal Dawn was ordered to return immediately, with Elder and his compromised crew to face evaluation. Contact with humans was to be minimized pending review. Later, Elder found himself in Pioneer's recreation room, where humans had introduced several Varans to music making. Lorne was attempting to play a guitar, his long fingers struggling with the unfamiliar instrument. What emerged was discordant, imperfect, and deeply moving. The young Varan's face showed concentration, frustration, and then joy when he successfully completed a simple melody. "I've been studying human art," Lorne told Elder afterward, "not just observing it, creating it. The experience is transformative." Throughout the ship, Elder saw similar changes. Varans engaged in debates, trying new foods, playing human games that involved chance and competition. They were experiencing emotion openly for the first time in their long lives. When Elder shared the Council's orders, the reaction was unprecedented. Crew members questioned, argued, even refused. Mrel, once the voice of traditional caution, suggested a radical alternative. "What if some of us stayed?" Mrel proposed. "Continued learning from the humans." "That would mean disobeying the Council," Elder said. "Something no Varan has done in recorded history." "Perhaps," Mrel replied. "It's time to make new history." Elder returned to his quarters aboard Eternal Dawn, facing the most significant decision of his 5,000-year existence. The logical choice was clear. The choice that felt right was something else entirely. Elder stood before the assembled crew of the Eternal Dawn, aware that his words would echo through Varan history. 2/3 of the ship's complement filled the main gathering hall. The remainder had chosen to stay with their duties, unwilling to participate in what many considered an act of rebellion. For 5,000 years, I have served the Varan Cooperative, Elder began. I have explored hundreds of worlds, catalogued thousands of species. Yet in all that time, I never questioned why I did these things. I simply existed, moving forward because time stretched endlessly before me. The room remained silent. Such personal reflections were rare in Varan discourse. 3 days ago, I witnessed something extraordinary. Elder continued. Navigator Lorne created music. Imperfect, simple music that no Varan would consider significant. Yet when he played, I felt something I had not experienced since my earliest centuries. The thrill of new creation. Elder activated a holographic display showing Earth, rotating slowly in the void. The humans measure their lives in decades, not millennia. Their bodies fail, their memories fade. By our standards, they barely exist before returning to dust. Yet they create art that moves the soul. They take risks that transform understanding. They love with an intensity born of precious scarcity. Whispers spread through the gathering. The concept of scarcity creating value challenged fundamental Varan assumptions. The Council has ordered our return, demanding we sever contact with humanity. They fear contamination. They are right to fear it. Elder paused. Because I stand before you contaminated. I have remembered what it means to live, not merely to exist. Elder revealed his decision. Half the crew would return with the ship as ordered, reporting faithfully to the Council. The other half, volunteers only, would remain behind in a specially constructed habitat, continuing to study human culture. Elder himself would stay. The announcement caused predictable divisions. Many older Varans rejected the proposal immediately. Others, particularly younger crew members, stepped forward as volunteers. The most surprising voice came from Mrel. I have served alongside Captain Elder for 3,000 years. Mrel addressed the gathering. In all that time, we accumulated knowledge but rarely wisdom. I choose to stay and learn what these brief, bright humans can teach us about living fully. 2 days later, Captain Walker stood with Elder watching the Eternal Dawn depart, its massive form growing smaller against the stars. Will your council send retrieval ships? Walker asked. Eventually, Elder replied. Though they move slowly, we may have years before they arrive. Walker smiled. A lifetime for some species. The human vessel Pioneer had been reassigned as a permanent contact ship. Its crew would rotate every few years, bringing fresh human perspectives to the growing Varan settlement. Already, the exchange was yielding results. Human scientists gained insights from Varan knowledge accumulated over millennia, while the Varans learned human adaptability and creative thinking. 1 month after the Dawn's departure, Elder made an announcement that shocked even his fellow rebels. Using techniques developed by Tam and human researchers, he had modified his biological systems to limit his remaining lifespan to approximately 100 years. Why? Walker asked when told the news. To experience life as you do, Elder explained. With preciousness, with urgency. I have existed for 5,000 years, but I have not truly lived for most of them. I would rather have 1 century of meaningful existence than endless empty millennia. Other Varans soon followed Elder's example, creating a new branch of their species, ones who chose mortality as a gift rather than a curse. They called themselves the Awakened. Years later, a young human researcher asked Elder if he regretted his choice, knowing his end would eventually come. Regret. Elder looked out at the settlement, where Varans and humans worked together on projects ranging from art to advanced physics. How can I regret trading eternal emptiness for true living? The humans thought we were immortal. but we were merely existing. They taught us that immortality isn't about endless time. It's about moments that matter. He touched a small musical instrument Lorne had made for him. We thought we lived forever, until we met humans and learned what living truly means.